What's going on, everybody? Nick from the Sound Coop here, and I had a pretty odd experience yesterday. I woke up and I decided I was going to do my very first negative gear review. Now, I've been doing this YouTube channel for a little over a year, and I haven't done a negative gear review yet, and that's not entirely an accident. Luckily, over the last 5 or so years of buying guitar-related gear, I've only got one piece of gear that I haven't been happy with, and that piece of gear is the Two-Rock Studio Signature 35-watt head and matching cab. Now, if I'm being totally honest, the idea of doing a negative gear review of a Two-Rock amplifier is a little bit daunting. They are a well-loved company. They have a massive roster of awesome players. Some of their vintage members are Matt Schofield and John Mayer. Some of the more modern additions are guys like Ariel Posen and Joey Landreth. These guys are all incredible players. All of that to say, Two-Rock is a very well-respected brand. On top of that, they're all built amazingly well by hand here in California, and that's not cheap. On top of that, the people that work for the company are extremely nice. When I got my Studio Signature, it actually wasn't working. Something had gone wrong with one of the tubes when it was shipped, and Eli was kind enough to ship me out a set of tubes, and they came in a couple days, which was really nice. So they totally took care of me. Everyone that works for the company has been very nice to deal with. I have really nothing bad to say about the company. It's just been a weird experience owning this amp. So what's my problem with the amp? Well, basically the easy way to put it is it's just a mid-range monster. I don't find it a lot of fun to play. I basically bought the thing to put in my practice and writing space so I'd have something clean and fun to play with. I'm obviously a big Stratocaster fan, so it seemed like the right choice. But after I set it up, I found out that it's very mid-forward. It's a little bit muddy. I spent a lot of time fiddling with the knobs, and I usually wouldn't play it for more than 15 or 20 minutes before I just got upset and stopped playing with it. And I did this for a number of years. Now, one of the first things I noticed was turning up the input gain actually makes this problem worse. It's almost like instead of getting distortion out of the input gain, you just get an increase in mid-range. And I guess the lack of distortion isn't surprising, right? It's a clean pedal platform type amp, so there shouldn't be any distortion for the most part. But I just found that instead of distortion, I was just getting all of this excessive mid-range. The only solution I could come up with was running the back input stage at the Fender Blackface setting, and then basically keeping the master turned all the way up, and then using the gain to set the loudness that I wanted in the room. Now, I think before getting this Two-Rock, I was a massive fan of the Fender Blackface thing, and I think mainly the twin reverb. So I was kind of expecting a Fender Blackface on steroids, and maybe that's actually what I got. Maybe I just didn't really realize what that meant. I guess at the end of the day, I had to attempt a negative review of this amp to really understand why it's actually a perfect addition to anyone's amp collection. Anyway, I digress. Back to yesterday. So I woke up, I was going to do this negative review. I basically set up the amp. I set up a microphone in the room, and I was going to use that microphone to show how muddy it sounds in the room. Now, to be fair, setting up a microphone in a room isn't going to sound exactly the way that someone's ears would, but from my point of view, it's close enough to make the point. With that said, in order to be totally fair, I just figured I'd put a mic directly on the cab as if I was just miking it up like normal. And my assumption was, if it was muddy in the room, it was going to be muddy coming from the cab, and I was completely wrong. As soon as I mic'd it up and I turned everything on and I listened to what was coming through the mic, I was completely blown away, and I instantly understood what all the fuss is about. Now, the unfortunate thing is I've owned this amp since July of 2020, and I have never put a microphone in front of it because I was just using it for songwriting and for practicing. And I really regret not doing this sooner, but I'm basically going to show you guys what I stumbled across yesterday. So we're going to go through the whole setup real quick, and I'm going to kind of give you guys a feel for how it sounds in the room, and then I'm going to show you guys the amazing thing that comes through the microphone when you get everything set up just right. So anyway, let's get into it. All right, let's go over the amp settings just really quick. So I got the input gain at noon, I got the bright switch on, and I got the deep switch on, I got the mid switch off. I got the treble just a little bit less than 3 o'clock, the middle's at noon, bass is at noon. We got the reverb off, all the reverb's coming through my Pro Tools. And the master is also at noon. The presence isn't quite dimed. I have it just a little bit less than dimed, which is kind of where I like it. So I'm also running the input gain switch in the back in the middle position, which is the Matt Schofield position, which is sort of the highest input setting. And the way I look at that is this is going to give me the most mid-range at the front end. I think it'll just give the best idea of how this actually sounds. I could run it at the Fender blackface setting and it would definitely be a little bit less mid-rangey, but I want to show you guys what I'm talking about here. So we're listening to the room mic right now. This is a U87AI. I picked this mic specifically because it's not mid-range forward. It's not going to enhance the problem. It's a very neutral sounding mic. Most engineers know what this mic sounds like, so my hope is this is going to give you a nice neutral idea as to how the room sounds. So this is the room. I mean, to me, it sounds mid-rangey. It's not terrible, but I also don't really have the input gain cranked too much. So that's what I'm noticing in the room. To me, I don't find that a lot of fun to play. It's not dull in the top, but the top isn't very forward. Now let's pop over really quick and have a listen to the actual mic on the cab. For this mic, I picked the Slate Digital ML2. I love this microphone because it's basically like a blank canvas for some digital modeling software. The mic that I chose to use inside of my Pro Tools is the Royer 121 emulation. So I picked this mic because it's a mid-forward mic. I don't know that it would necessarily exacerbate the problem, but it definitely does an accurate job of capturing the mid-range. And I wouldn't say it's a bright mic, although I wouldn't call it dark either. So I think if the amp is a really muddy sounding amp, this is going to tell us very well that it is in fact that. So let me just flip these really quick. Here we go. This is the amp. I mean, don't tell me that doesn't sound amazing, right? Just comparatively, like very dull in the room, very bright and airy here, but it also has this cool up front kind of a mid thing, almost like the mid-range is compressed and focused, not like the way it would sound if you EQ'd in mids, but just sort of like a presence. Now let's mess around with it a little bit. Let's just turn the master down a little bit and let's just crank this input gain. We're obviously a lot louder there, but to me, you're just getting a lot more mids pushed, but it doesn't sound dull, doesn't sound muffly. There's still plenty of top end there. It just gives it this sort of mid-range presence that you don't get out of a typical blackface. So for me, this is sort of a unique experience. Let's mess around with it a little bit more. I'm gonna kind of bring the gain back down just a little bit because it's pretty loud right now. And let's just turn up the mids all the way. Still sounds pretty good, still plenty of treble there, definitely a lot more mid-focused, a little bit of bark. Just a little bit, not a ton, but pretty cool. Let's actually put the mids back to noon and let's flip on the middle switch. Now to me, that's where it starts to get a little honky, a little muffly. Some guys like that, especially with the Stratocaster. Totally not my vibe, but you can hear it even worse if I turn the bright switch and the deep switch off. That's really pushing the amp. Turning the deep switch off definitely gives it a little more. But I still want to point out, there's a ton of high end there as well. So even when you're really focusing the mid-range of this thing, it's just doing something with the top. It's keeping the top intact. It's almost like, again, it's almost like the mid-range is compressed and the dynamics come from the fundamental note under the mid-range and then the articulation of the transient on the top end. And to me, this is just really unique. Like a Blackface won't do this. So I really find this pretty cool. All right, so what's going on with this mid-range? Now, if you've ever mic'd up a Fender Blackface, you may have noticed it's pretty mid-scooped. And one of the things, like as an engineer, that I've always noticed is it's a lot harder to get those amps to sit right with like a drums and bass mix because they're occupying the high end and the low end just like drums and bass are. So it can be a tricky thing to get to fit in the mix. Now, my one-stop shop for fixing this all these years has been an opto compressor, especially one that has a tube stage like an LA2A. The cool thing about this is the opto compressor is so slow that it's letting the transients of the guitar through in a pretty substantial way, and then it's just kind of clamping down on the mids after that. So when you start to turn it back up, it's kind of pushing those mids forward and it's allowing the transient to sneak by. And so it doesn't bring up the bass like an EQ would. It just kind of makes the mid-range more present. It almost compresses in the mids. And then again, like the dynamics come from sort of the fundamental and the high articulation of the instrument, which is really pretty cool. It's almost like the Two-Rock is doing that for me. Like it's sort of saving me that step, which is kind of helpful. I think everybody knows these amps are kind of clean platform amps. And so I think to me what that means is when you're turning up the input gain, instead of getting distortion, you're getting this kind of mid-range bloom. It's almost like a harmonic saturation. And so I was hearing it as mid-range in my room and finding it not flattering at all. But through the microphone, it's like a whole different vibe. And that was like pretty amazing to me. So I don't know, it's kind of a cool sound. I didn't really expect this to happen. I was literally going to list this thing for sale after I made this video. And then I just put the microphone in front of it and I was like, I don't know what I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. Like what? I've been wasting my time messing around with the Blackface in my amp locker when this thing should probably be in my amp locker. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. I think I'm going to probably move this thing into my amp locker. I think I'm probably going to bring the twin reverb out and put it in my writing space. And I'm going to mess around with this amp for a while. I'm really excited about it. I'm so sorry it took me this many years to figure this out, but pretty amazing little rig. And I can only imagine that it gets better when you spend more money. This thing was, I think at the time, $3,300 for the amp plus cab. And I think now the heads are going for what, like 36? So, and I got mine in a custom brown ostrich wrap, which I really love. So that's why it was a little bit more expensive. I think the head and cabs when I bought this 4.5 years ago or whatever was like around $2,900. So they've obviously gone up in price, but it's nice to know that I didn't. I mean, like I was kind of feeling like I wasted my money all this time. Not wasting my money, but I spent a lot of money for something that wasn't my vibe. And it was kind of nice to realize that it not being my vibe was mainly just a lack of me not exploring the amp to its fullest. So anyway, pretty cool. It's nice to turn a negative review into a positive review. It makes me feel like not as much of a jerk for hating the Two-Rock all these years when everybody else seems to love them. I mean, I literally have one buddy out of all my guitar friends, you know who you are, who hates the Two-Rock. Only one guy that I know out of everybody that owns them dislikes his Two-Rock. So it was me and him. Now it's just him. You're on your own, buddy. Sorry. This thing is a gem. Anyway, hope you guys had a good time with the video. If you guys like it, please do like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. It helps me out a lot. And I will see you guys again soon with another one. Bye.